We have completed our breakout session time and are ready to come back together and report out. I do want to thank all of the staff for all of this time that you have taken with each one of the members of the board, and am excited to hear the feedback that you have gotten from different ones of us. This has been really an invigorating afternoon, and I hope it has been for everybody on the board, but for the staff as well. So with that, we will turn it over to, it looks like goal number 1, academics.
All right, so in terms of strengths, we saw some consistency in that area. The other ones were kind of a little all over the board, but master teacher programming was something that was a strength that was identified more than once. A shift to mastery grading was a positive that was mentioned multiple times. Strengthening our online platforms and streamlining them was also mentioned as well as a strength. The data-driven feedback, so the PLCs, the move of PLCs to set and required and kind of followed up with times was also a strength that was mentioned a couple of times. And moving CTE down to middle school level, I think I didn't mention that, but I would, and I'll pretend like there's one for me on there too. That is a good thing. Do you want to look at?
I'm going to put this so we can really hear you.
Sorry. These things are, they're awful.
Right close to it. Yep.
All right, for clarifications, there's going to have to probably be some education for expectations for PLCs, recognition that, and this is something I said in all of my groups, anytime you use the word continuing or maintaining, it drives me up the wall because it's not really growth. It is just maintaining a status quo. And so if we can use a stronger word choice, I would prefer that. So strengthening as opposed to continuing or growing or investing or however we want to do that. It just communicates a stronger stance than just maintaining. Let's see, clarify on data usage. What data are you using to evaluate? Use of assessments, again, that comes back to data, what and why. Back to clarification with mastery grading. Ms. Price mentioned that that's going to be an education piece that she's going to be working on, not just for teachers, because that's already started for them, but also for parents to understand what that means as we move forward. Simplifying, I think the first goal is there's a lot packed into that first goal, or not first goal, first objective, and maybe needing to make it more succinct or simplified, or breaking it into 2 objectives would be wise, but that's one of those things. Full-time, the full-time employee specialized, like interventionists, things in the classroom, there was some need for clarification. What does that look like? What does that entail? And what is the funding going to look like moving forward long term? So that also leads into concerns, the funding of the FTEs. Yeah, I mean, really, if we had the funding, why not? But that would be one of the questions is how are we going to, once we implement this, how do we continue to fund it? Because I think it's going to be an outstanding use for our community. We just need to make sure we can pay for it. Common planning time was a concern. Tutoring, it says inviting subgroups and targeted assistance. What does that look like? Who are we targeting? Is that going to be employed tutors, or is that going to be student tutors? Things like that need to be looked at. RTI, Tier 2, and scheduling, and the shifts that might occur in the middle school regarding the changes in RTI, because there have already been some scheduling shifts, and there will probably be more in the future. What does that look like? And there are concerns with that. Back to the master teacher funding again. I think we need to do that one, but that's okay. Academics and arts, continuing programs from after COVID, making sure we're strengthening them back because they are taking a hit right now. But also, I think vertical alignment may be what collaboration and engagement. Make sure there's a robust curriculum. STEM and CTA in lower grades. What does that look like? How does that impact?
Educating parents.
Yeah.
Educating parents on our academic goals.
Yeah, and then communicating those to parents, yeah. What else?
Outcomes for success.
Yeah, making sure that our outcomes for success, the indicators for success are measurable. If we're looking at narrowing the gap, then are we looking at what the gap currently is and how well is it narrowing with the goals that we've set and the objectives we've set? So that's it. Yes, that's us.
I'm going to invite people to discuss that. Were there areas of strength that anybody wanted to particularly lift up after having?
I would just mention one. I felt a strength, though, was that we were going to expand our EPSOs and our CTE. But I also would like to see that also not just be high school level, but be brought down into the middle school as well as eventually elementary. But I'd like to see that expanded. And I guess one of the concerns of that, of course, is funding.
I second what Ms. Fisher said. I think that's excellent. I think when you look at EPSOs and things, sometimes that vertical alignment, you're feeding the programs in to each other. And that also works with the arts programming. If you have a strong arts program in elementary school and a strong in the middle school, then you're going to feed an excellent program in for high school. One of the concerns I didn't mention is consistency of programming, making sure that Riverdale Middle and Houston Middle, in terms of co-curricular and curricular activities, are consistent. And I think there's been some effort there and it's some improvement, but we need to make sure that continues to grow and improve, particularly with our co-curricular activities. The other strength, every single area talked about professional development, which is just pleases me to no end, and it talks about PLCs. And the more we can get our teachers working with and talking to each other and working together to plan, I think that's necessary. So I thought that was definitely a strength.
But Ms. Over, one of the things I had a concern about that, the PLCs, is allowing time for our faculty members to meet, because the scheduling sometimes is difficult. But I will say one of the pluses we talked about was that with Zoom now, that may make some of the scheduling easier. But that still was a concern for me with the PLCs, is giving the time and scheduling to our staff. And also, too, I like that they were going to do sort of a PLC expectation campaign, because I think we all, it doesn't hurt to inform our teachers about how important this is.
As far as strengths, the implementation of a master teacher program, I thought was huge for our district. I also really appreciated, there were a few things, but I really appreciated the grading change, doing more of a standards-based grading change. I think that is going to be beneficial, particularly when you consider parents understanding the mastery of a topic, of a subject. But the focus on the differentiation and individualizing student education. It's a great approach. It's a big ask, but I think it's definitely a change maker for us.
I would say that one struggle I had was with the first objective, and I shared that with the team, that it is so much in that one objective. There are a lot of words there. And I've said it in a couple of the groups that, people reading this are not always education people. And so when they're looking at that, that's a lot of information. If there is a way to either make it more succinct, make it more, instead of putting a whole fillet in your mouth, you're putting some bites in your mouth, that would be, I think, more powerful. Also, and palatable. Also, it could even be broken into 2 objectives, but use the same strategies broken between the 2 objectives. So it's not creating necessarily an additional work situation, but it's just clarifying for those who are coming to this without a lot of background.
As a non-educator, I can say that first one, for me, breaks between the fidelity checks, now that I understand what they are, and the grading practices. That those 2 really are 2 different projects, to my mind, that warrant 2 different objectives. I was really pleased with the focus on Tier 2 students and knowing that it is going to take at least 3 years to move through a full plan, but being able to focus on Tier 2 students at this point because we feel so good about where we've been going is a real benefit, positive.
And I think also too, the adding, you're talking about the Tier 2, but also working on adding the enrichment for the 6th through 8th graders. That's sort of-
Absolutely. Yes. The changes to RTI for middle school, I think, are really positive. Are there challenges that we want to lift up?
Funding.
I was just about to say, money would
That's
be
a
nice.
theme.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be our ongoing challenge, is making sure that we have what we need operationally to provide what our students need and our teachers deserve.
Because I think
Can we put that on a bumper sticker?
Because I think some of that investment we're talking about, we want to see more CTE, better STEM labs, better science labs, and expanding the episodes. That's all going to be about being able to update our facilities, which is going to require funding.
And if we go back to the master teachers or I think the specialized paras, we're talking additional funding in terms of staffing, and that's operational. So we're looking at both sides of the coin, needing better facilities and stronger staffing.
Differentiation is going to require time, which requires more manpower. But while a challenge, it's a laudable goal. Do we want to move to?
Good. Y'all are still good. Yes.
Are you still going?
Please do. No.
I haven't let you go. Go.
Got about 30 seconds
Ms.
left.
Griffith.
Y'all are good.
Drinks. I'm just going to reiterate what everybody else said. I think that the grading, the standards-based grading is implementation and the move in a direction of where we're headed as a world. And I think that as we identify the growth in that way, that'll be helpful for not only our students, but our staff. As Ms. Price was pointing out, I think it's really important too to the CTEs and the lower levels feeding in, like Ms. Oaf talked about the arts, and then Ms. Fisher was talking about even some of those vertical going. I specifically pointed out that we, making sure that people at those levels know before they get there, this is where you're headed, this is what's going to be available to you, these are the options that you have to have a structured type path. And talking about the technology, Mr. Cooper and Dr. Fuller made both excellent points in my session, and it was about, hey, we're having to do all these things here lately for obvious reasons, but the good news was we made sure that we got together with products that we were going to use long-term. Is this just a COVID fix, or is this something that we're going to use for over the next several years? And I'm talking about some of those platforms specifically, but also how we will be able to use those in ways virtually in the future. when it's not even a requirement, but it'll be a way to engage students in a different way and add for, because I asked a lot about flexibility, creativity, and the differentiation, because we know what we have to do, but what opportunities do we have to do other things outside of that? And that technology and those new platforms are really going to help us bring people together and do more project-based things.
Number 2.
Yeah, maybe we can stick it to this for a minute. Okay, goal number 2 is whole child. And what we really saw in the strengths area are the community partnerships that we have, particularly around student health, and the ability for students to get outside the classroom and partner with people in the community. Our focus on mental health. We talked in my group about OAS and the fact that it's rolling out. It isn't complete. There are years to this program, and so we continue to build on where we already are. Physical health, inclusion, safety, student safety, engaging students. Those were the strengths that we're seeing in whole child. Clarifications that we saw were the diversity and inclusion, and inviting mental health agencies to participate and partner with us. How do you provide opportunities for lower grades, particularly with service in the community? And how do you engage lower grades in community service? That's sort of the same thing, I think. Did I cover them all? Okay. This was one that I had as a clarification. Could the counselors create age-appropriate questions as suggested questions for homeroom teachers to use as their attendants during this time, so that they build relationships with their students, but also use that time for a little bit of a whole child temperature check? So one day might be with third graders. Do you have a pet? Yes or no? Tell me your pet's name if you do, or if you don't, what would you like to have for a pet? The next day might be, do you have a best friend? Yes or no? What's your friend's name? What do you like to do with your friend? The next day might be, if you had a problem, who would you go to? Mom, dad, a teacher, somebody else at school, or I don't have anybody to go to. Those are opportunities for us to build to a temperature check with students, and for that homeroom teacher to be able to identify, even from a virtual place, who needs a little bit more of a check-in. So that was just sort of a clarification of a resource that I realized we have now that we could build on. Concern areas, we are in need of additional staff people in mental health, licensed mental health counselors, social workers, counselors in the schools. And so I put it on the thing, put it back. Mr. Bland said, we don't have money. I said, I know, put it on the sticky. We really need to have as one of our goals to increase by 1 staff person per year to just bring ourselves in ratio with what is expected. We were talking about devices to students, to IT people. We have to think about how many students and families can one counselor provide care for, and we are, I think, well over our limit. Ensuring funding is in place for our support, our goals. Attendance to stakeholder meetings, and we talked a little bit about in this time of COVID, now that we've all learned how to Zoom and webinar, and that recording our meetings and putting those on our website so that parents can refer back to them. I told him I wanted to come to the vaping one. It wasn't a hot issue at my house right now, thank goodness, but I wanted to come. I had something else that night. I couldn't come, but I certainly would have listened to it while I was exercising the next day. So those are opportunities for us to take advantage of everybody being forced into a more virtual world. We also talked about offering the opportunity for other mental health agencies to offer workshops. They could even use the community room here, and we would let parents know that that workshop was happening, record it, and put it on our website as a resource to the community. I think that's a good way to partner to increase whole child and whole family health. Were there other concerns? How to track growth of meeting the goals for participation. Tracking is always challenging. But obviously, if we put it on, we could always count our views, which would be a way to track it. Okay, so that's our...
Okay. Leave it up there. We still got to discuss. Discussion time. Oh, it doesn't matter. You can't read it anyway, so.
Okay, so were there strengths, weaknesses, concerns, or clarifications that we didn't cover in our summary that you want to make sure that get lifted up?
In the student engagement, develop opportunities for student engagement. Let me start with this. The physical health one, I'm thrilled about that. I think helping families understand the tie to physical health and the impact on their capacity to learn is essential. And the more we can do to grow and communicate that is spot on. And if we can help families and community members with that, that's great. The student engagement area, I think I had questions regarding 2.2.2. It just was very, very vague. And I felt like we needed to, for the indicators of success, it just said opportunities for student leadership clubs, fine arts, athletic, and academies. I would like to see something a little stronger, where promotion is also involved. It's not just providing those opportunities, but promoting those opportunities. Like I shared with that group, my son was in the Uno club his 8th grade year because he didn't know in 6th and 7th grade there was an Uno club, but then he found it in 8th grade. And not that that's a super academic high-level club, but it is a group. And when you're dealing with middle school and high school in particular, these kids need these groups.
I think that's a good comment, but I will say, at the high school, they actually have all the clubs out, and ahead of time that they can, on their way to lunch, they can look at them all,
Right.
and maybe that might be
That may be
something to pass down to the middle school.
Shared best
And that way,
practices.
they could go and see what clubs were available, and that might be a good idea
Right.
to pass down to the middle school.
And I think the other side of it is also recognizing there's co-curricular and there's extracurricular. And so as we're looking at co-curricular opportunities and extracurricular opportunities, we want to not only provide the opportunities for these kids to develop the strengths in their talents, whether it's musical or performance or athletics or whatever that is, we do want to promote those activities so that those kids who are not immediately engaging are engaging. It's the kids that fall through the cracks that worry me, the ones that aren't engaging in those things. And so if we can somehow gauge participation and growth in those areas, I would like to see that. And that, particularly with co-curricular, may include additional funding necessary, whether that's strengthening programming from K all the way through 12 in some type of vertical alignment for those programs, or evening out so that Houston Middle School has a theater program, just like Riverdale Middle School has a theater program. So those are some things I think we need to be looking at in terms of whole child, is not just, hey, these are we need to provide opportunities, but how are we providing those opportunities, and are doing what we need to promote them and support them?
I just would add, Our continued focus and strengthening of our focus on social emotional health. I think in this time of changes as far as our educational system, where we're looking at virtual, in-school, hybrid, I think it's important that we continue to strengthen our work in this area, and that leads to having more staffing that you mentioned. But I do think it was an important strength of the goal is to continue to focus in on social emotional health.
Ms. Landers, to that point, one of the things that we talked about when I was in the group was the need to identify a stress management curriculum that could be used across the grade spans, much like the Olveus is, something that we could introduce to students to assist them with the levels of stress that they're experiencing both at school and at home. I opened it up to strengths, weaknesses, or feedback, clarification.
Absolutely gave a lot of compliments regarding the strengths of the existing programs and continuing for those to evolve, not to be maintained, but continuing to grow. I think someone pointed out, maybe Chairman Lutter, and we talked about that when I was in the group, about the OAS particularly and how it is even being expanded, because I specifically asked about with the increased technology and the opportunities for cyberbullying and Ms. Law. And Mr. Bland pointed out that that was something that even that format and platform are incorporating further as a result of some of those changes in society. Also, to the social emotional, Ms. Landers, my email to all the people in the whole world has continued to be for the past several months. If anybody thought we needed funding to support mental health and social emotional wellness and education in January of this year, if we don't need more of it now, then I don't know what to tell you, because every experience that has occurred in our community and abroad as a result of everybody being at home and away from one another, I think that this has changed dramatically, and these focuses still apply. And I just hope that we will continue to promote and not just provide the opportunities. That was a little bit about what we discussed, and that we have so many wonderful things in place specific to opportunities for students, but making sure that those are, like Ms. Oaf was mentioning, making sure that those things, the UNO Club is promoted. And promoted to parents, not just students, especially at those lower grade levels, and making sure that people realize. I know the club days at the high school, you go in a big thing, and they do that. They do that at the middle school, but it's on the night when you're meeting the teacher, and the gym's crowded, and you're like, I'll get that next time, but that might not be the next time, making sure that those opportunities are available is super important. But adding that staff, I'm going to tell you, y'all know me, and I feel really strongly about it, identifying the people who need it. And we talked, you said stress. The word I think we used was more that anxiousness or anxiety in the current situation and virtual learning environment and what that's created for a lot of our students. And Ms. Law talked a little bit about some things that are moving ahead and specific to the counselors and making sure. I will say, we have some outstanding counselors in our district, and I would like to, as we pointed out, another funding piece, like to see that department grown in the next 5 years. We're not going to have any more schools, I don't think, but I'd like to see more people in those roles for the ones that we do have. A big part of what's happened in our world from a social justice standpoint over the past several months, to me, it's been going on since the beginning of time, but I think we all have had it more in the forefront and under a different lens, maybe, that we're looking at it. I think that we owe it to our community and to our students and staff to, from a whole child standpoint, to really focus and figure out in the next 5 years how we are going to look at inclusion, look at diversity, help people understand the differences that we all come from and backgrounds being unique and people's, uniqueness, if you will, kind of being something that we foster. And we talk about, what's our new, inspiring personal excellence, it's individual, but it's also accepting, and just making sure that our student base is thinking about big picture and what that looks like for the whole child, because that's what we talked about, whole child. Sometimes people are talking about whole child of the whole group, but also are we talking about the whole child of each individual student?
Go ahead. All right, group 3, recruit, develop, and retain exemplary staff.
Okay. Goal 3 is recruit, develop, and retain exemplary employees. We'll start with our strengths. I think everybody was in agreement that Blue Chips program is a definite strength for our district, and as well as our benefits package. I think that the strength that we are offering a great health program, that we have not increased our costs since the beginning of the district, is an important part of it, as well as trying to stay in the top 10 of compensation financially. Another Blue Chips. Another benefits. Strength, another strength was the Snapshot program, going into the schools. It's just an out-of-the-box thinking way to help us recruit. And let's see. Again, our benefit package. Some of the strengths were mentioned as well were that we do offer leadership opportunities. But I think also too some of the concerns on the opposite, it's a concern as well. Are we offering enough leadership opportunities for our staff? We're a small district. We don't have a lot of opportunities for upper management. And we also were talking that, in my group, that some of our teachers, we don't want to lose as teachers. They're great teachers. So what other leadership roles could we offer them so they have some leadership roles, but they can still continue teaching our students? I can't read that one. National compensation. Is that compensation again? Oh, compensation. Okay. Let's see. Go over to clarifications a little bit. Talked about some more, again, opportunities for advancement, maybe some more cross-training of our teachers. We also talked a little bit about the balance of new teachers and older teachers in our school system, and looking at a way to make sure we're balancing some of that. Well, clarification was to develop a master teacher program, which we've already talked about in the academics, was having the Blue Chip program, but then having a master teacher program where once they are in the classroom and out of the Blue Chip program, there would be someone that could go in and just, not to judge them, not to evaluate them, but to help work with them on things they might need assistance in teaching. Some of the discussion was around in the future, as we go out 4 or 5 years, there may be some positions in teaching that are going to be harder to find teachers in, math and science area. And we talked a little bit about making sure that we have the funds for some special hiring bonuses for those teachers down the road.
Just
thing.
exactly what you were talking about, making sure that we have the funds to pay for our teachers.
Didn't Mason write these? I can't read your writing. We were talking a little bit about some concern was the strength of our PD sessions. I can live out about some videos, some are just videos. Are they getting anything from a video versus having some actual training and looking at what works best for our staff and providing PD? I think it's everything on the recruit, develop, and retain.
There was only one thing that you just said that wasn't discussed in our thing, so it sounds like a lot of the same conversations were had.
Okay, discussion time. Strengths, clarifications, concerns, feedback from what we heard.
I'm excited, and I told them this also. I'm excited to see the outcome of the Blue Chip program. It's coming into, I think they said, the 5th year, and so as they are able to follow these teachers beyond, getting the feedback of, how did this help? What do they look like 2-3 years out of the Blue Chip program? What areas can we strengthen in that? I'm just very excited to hear that because I know it's such a wonderful program that they've worked so hard on, and to be able to now follow up with that data and say, look at this outstanding program, and here's what it paid off to do, and have this teacher. Once we've done this investment in this teacher, are we keeping this teacher, 10 years, 15 years, whatever, as this moves on? I think that excites me. I think they're being very forward thinking. So I was thrilled with their objectives. I think they are actively seeking, how do we do this? How do we maintain, not only recruit, but maintain, I hate that word. How do we recruit, but also grow and keep these outstanding educators and staff people that we have? And I appreciate their work in this.
One of the things, and I think it was throughout their work, was the realization that when we go to recruit, retain staff and teachers, that it's about more than money. It's something that this district really excels at, creating that family, those opportunities, that support. And I think the strength of helping grow that was evident. My big concern, particularly after I had my meeting, was the compensation package, which I think is something we can all agree on is a continuous concern, being competitive in the world of recruiting a dwindling amount of teachers out there, but really focusing on the compensation of experienced teachers in hard-to-fill positions, particularly those with 8 to 10 years experience, because there's a big salary differential in that area. And being aware that we don't fall into the trap of creating a great program for new teachers, where we recruit young, exciting new teachers, we take them through the Blue Chip program, we train them, and then they move on elsewhere. So that was one of my concerns.
I think we all saw a lot of sticky notes that pertain specifically to compensation and benefits, and that seemed to be the biggest thing that we as a district do a fantastic job in promoting. But as someone just mentioned, people work places for a lot of different reasons, and not only for the compensation, also the ability to grow within. We talked about, I refer to us out in the world as a boutique district due to our size. Ms. Stratton got tickled. She was like, I like that. Because there's not a lot of room for growth within, depending on what you want to do for advancement. So that was something that we had discussed in my session, specific to identifying those leader-type teachers and what that might look like, those opportunities. And also looking at strategic plans all over the Southeast, something, of course, larger districts need, and availability for this or opportunity for this would probably be greater, but like a succession plan within a department. Of course, our department at our central office is a lot smaller, for instance, than our friends in Shelby County. So that need to be deep, but also that cross-training that I think Ms. Fisher and Ms. Stratton mentioned, that was something that is a way to do that. And I know, for instance, we have a department that has had some change, and there's been a lot of that going on. So I think that based on the plan for both academics and this right now, that was something that we see how we're working together with our employees and giving them those opportunities for those leadership roles, possibly. Even there was some discussion when I got with Mr. Jones about any stipend opportunities that might be available for those folks. We did talk about, again, diversity and the candidate pool of the future and how our department that's seeking these positions, the people for these positions, and how they will identify and assess what that looks like. And also just the culture, like we said, we talk a lot about identifying financial and compensation, but also what culture continues to be for openness and ability to grow within and promoting that on the in the future, so that people continue to have, our HR department is so accessible, and I compliment them and I receive compliments about them all the time, but we're looking down the road 5 years, and I think that point about having those people, we don't want to lose people, so what does that look like, and how do we continue to fill those positions and retain those people?
I think one of the things that we talked about was that we do a good job recruiting, we do a great job orienting, and making sure that we reflect back on our recruiting classes to determine, do we need to fine-tune our eye for diversity? Do we need to fine-tune our eye for a newer teacher versus a more experienced teacher? Do we need to fine-tune our eye to this grade band has mostly younger teachers, we need a teacher who can be an anchor teacher? Those kinds of reflections in the PD as part of the stratification plan for professional development for administrators versus for teachers, and their plan to continue to create professional development that is more targeted to what your particular role is within the district was really exciting. Anything else on recruiting, retaining, developing? Okay. We move to Group 4, Resource Management and Long-Range Planning.
Hopefully I can read Mr. Jones's writing. He's good at numbers. Okay, we're going to talk about strengths real quickly. Aligning the budget to the strategic plan kind of was across the board for all of the board members as being something important. The Alumni Association was mentioned. The use of, I can't read that, effective use of devices. Our online payment system is a strength, but there was also the counterbalance to that is listening to parents and analyzing our online payment system. The 5-year strategic plan. Oh, and that's even mine, and I can't read it.
Need to communicate.
That we needed to communicate some of our smaller projects to the community, that there's still the myth that we are not taking care of deferred maintenance when we actually are. And so everybody notices the big projects, but they don't always take note of the smaller projects and what we're accomplishing. Acknowledge the redesign of the budget document. And we had some discussion, long discussions on different things that we could do. Outstanding job of identifying capital needs, the inclusion of capital projects, smaller capital projects in the plan. Planning for the loss of Title I funds was a huge concern, and being very forward-thinking in this particular document, doing that. Relating the budget to the strategic plan. The plan, gee, I wonder where that came from. The plan periodic OPEB contributions was a strength, as well as maintaining, sorry, that's a good word in this case, adequate reserves for the district, as well as the importance of communicating to the broader community what our reserves are for and how they're necessary. The clarifications that we received were to create a community support organization with a fee attached. That was an interesting concept. Time frame of the Alumni Association, great idea. How are we going to use it? What is the time frame to develop it and put it into use? And then upfront conversation by the board of early stages of the budget development was one of the things that someone brought up, and that kind of relates back to the board's responsibilities as the budget is concerned, and where our job begins and ends. So Mr. Jones is going to cover the concerns because we had more of those than anything else.
Okay, just to mention some of the concerns. The flexible use of technology. Feedback of parents on My School Bucks. Are we using the correct online payment system? Looking at the member makeup of the facilities plan committee. Looking at the tech support and the device to staffing ratio. Under the whole child, adding arts, co-curricular components, and its related funding. Concerns were expressed about the lack of funding for the Houston Middle School edition. There was a need expressed for funding for mental health counselors, lowering teacher-student ratios, providing incentives to teachers for grant writing, and specialized seasoned staff for math and science, providing some type of compensation. One big, I guess, matter of discussion was the funding shortfalls, the decisions of the governor at the last minute, stipends, salaries for leadership opportunities at the school level, increase the budget for communications and Alumni Association establishment, garnering community involvement and funding with the city and county. And do we have enough resources for the whole child to meet the needs, i.e. counseling services?
Thank you. I'm going to open us up to discussion, but I'm going to add a clarification on one. The student-teacher ratio being lower was one of mine, and the reasoning was that if this, or as this COVID situation continues, and we are in a situation of lower student-teacher ratios right now, we will need additional funding when the CARES Act funding is gone. So that was my funding concern there with lower student-teacher ratios. Other comments, concerns, feedback?
I think a couple of years ago, Mr. Jones and his team started actively aligning the budget document to the strategic plan, and it has been fabulous to have that. So I know he's looking at how to do that better, and I think that's wonderful. But I do want to compliment that being the way he has incorporated this strategic plan into the budget development has been helpful to me as I read it, as I absorb it, as I'm trying to wrap my head around the budget document. I think it helps all of us to have clarity of, are we addressing our needs that we have set out? So I think that's a wonderful strength. And really the main challenge here is just having the money, and convincing our funding bodies that our children, their education, their well-being, and their health are essential and not something that they can delay. And their safety, as you were mentioning earlier, Ms. Fisher, with the need for a safe entrance and additional space at Houston Middle School. So that, I think, is a challenge not only for our district, but for this board and the board coming, and our community as a whole. We're all going to have to be active and vocal about that.
Really, to sum it up, we need funding. And that, obviously, the funding shortfall, the unplanned cash flow needs. I mean, we really got hit hard after we'd gone a long way down the path to creating our budget with decisions made at the state level, even at our city level. That really, and it's hard to plan for the coming year. In each of my groups, I did ask the question, what funding will you need over the next 5 years? Because I think it's extremely important as we go through this that we're realistic about the kind of funding we need to be looking to plan for. If we're going to accomplish this amazing plan, then that we have to be realistic and work toward making sure that we can properly fund everything. I did want to note one strength that didn't get mentioned, which is our continued use of continuing the strategic approach to our 5 years facility plan. It has served us well, and I think continuing that will help us achieve the completion of the facilities needs we have in this district.
I will say too, having been on the board since the beginning, when I look at what we've done facility-wise, between starting roofs, air conditioning, to major projects like a new elementary school, but we've also been able to, and this is what I want to thank the staff, we've been able to do some smaller projects, whether it's replace the carpet in the offices in the library, whether it's put a hardwood floor in the gym, whether it's working now on our mechatronics lab. We've really been able to use our funding wisely. And when I look back, all we've done, major projects and smaller projects along the way, we have done a lot. But I do agree, we are going to need more funding. My one concern, again, is that Houston Middle School does not have a secure entrance. And I know it's been delayed because of the city with the funding, but all our other schools, we've invested a lot of money this past 2 years in making all of our schools safe. And I feel like Houston Middle has been sort of left behind. And I will add one more thing. I think it's very important we add, continue adding funds for supporting our children with counseling as we continue to try to add more social workers. I know it's hard for even some of our students that do need counseling to be able to go get counseling because they don't want to miss school. And the only times available are 4 to 6, and those fill up. And I don't know what we can do, but if we can look at, and there's a lot of issues, but providing some kind of counseling during the day for some students that are really in need of it. Since some of them don't have the opportunity, their parents may work too during the day, and I would tell you it is very difficult to get into counseling appointments.
I'm just going to put a lot of exclamation points right behind what Ms. Fisher said about the need for the social emotional services within the schools directly and what that staffing may look like. We're talking about the budget or the financial parts right now, and resources. So that is one to me that I think absolutely positively, we talked about it in Whole Child, and we talked about it when I was with Mr. Jones and company. And that's a significant priority in our community. I hear it from other people, and I'll be frank with you, I've lived it personally, and I know that the need is there. And when we talk about what schools are, there are a lot of things nowadays, as we all know, that are in addition to classroom academics and education. Also about the facilities, I don't know how that didn't make it on there because Mr. Law and Mr. Cathy got like a round of applause for me in Mr. Jones's session, specifically about that rolling 5-year facilities plan and what that looks like. And I know that takes a lot of planning and identifying and prioritizing, and sometimes things get bumped and moved down, and sometimes things get jumped because the priority gets greater. But I think that as a plan is something that is very, has been successful, and I continue to see how things get marked off and other things get added to it. And again, that rolling nature of that has taken a lot of work to get those projects not only done, but identified the needs. So I do think that is important. I'm glad that got mentioned because we definitely talked about that. As far as the budget process itself, I really appreciate Mr. Jones, again, echoing Ms. Oaf. I think that the process has gotten specific to the strategic plan. I appreciate that integrating that further. We talked about that a little bit, and I think that is really important and helpful. It's just helpful for us as we're going through it, quite frankly. Everything we've talked about, the needs of Houston Middle School not having the secure entrance. If I have said those words 1,000 times since May, I've said them 1,000 times since May. That to me is going to continue to be one of the immediate urgent things that when it comes to a facilities and a budgeting and a financial use of our resources, that I'm going to continue to prioritize. And I hope that we will work that as part of one of our goals specific to identifying those funds.
Thank you. I think that the need for mental health is evident in every area of our plan. Maybe with community partnerships as a B side, but students who are suffering from anxiety and depression and stress are not ready to learn. And so we have to address where we have been, particularly since March, with additional funding and additional counselors. But we were already in need of that. And so I think it's important that we continue to seek the funding to make that happen. Are we ready to move to community partnerships?
We've come a long way since January 30th. Goal 5, community partnerships. Specifically, Ms. Crowder and I, and then I believe Mr. Cathy and Mr. Manuel were in my original committee session. And so as we come back through this plan that we've all looked at several times, a lot of the strengths pertain to internships, professional development. We talk of an annual publication. I like the idea because that's what I told Mr. Jones. I said, we can have this alumni association, which we're going to talk about here too, it's been mentioned in other things. And you can be a member, and that'll only cost you this much. And you'll get your publication. That'll be part of that. So identifying those folks and in the alumni networking community and building off of that for potential fundraising, okay? And let's see, real world opportunities, engagement of stakeholders. That was something in the plan specifically that is pointed out, but we talked a little bit also about making sure we identify which stakeholders sometimes specifically we're talking about. And also providing all the things that we talk about in the district. We talked about that in several groups, that we're just providing something versus promoting that thing. When you're talking to the people in the community, you want it to be like, this is so awesome and amazing, and this is why we need you to know about it. So talking a little bit about just promotion of what all the good things we have going on. Student ambassador, that was one that came up multiple times. Ms. Crowder mentioned, and what that looked like. And she did use the example of the high school type level where maybe more specific and honed for that, but then also working that down and building it up from the lower school and middle school, and what that could look like for specific guides for tours, or even just people that greet people and kind of know the way and maybe have some training at that level. Alumni network. Okay. Clarifications, timelines, and goals. So, and what are we doing to increase pipeline from school to teaching? Okay, Mr. Gillespie answered this.
That was Ms. Sander's suggestion that we develop teachers, or students to become teachers
Okay.
within our.
That we look at, had we ever considered focusing on
Our students. Yeah.
encouraging students to consider education when we talk about CTEs and giving real-world opportunities, that we start to maybe develop our own pipeline of teachers as they matriculate through.
Got it. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Thank you for letting me know about that. I like this handwriting, but I can't read it. There was some talk about linking specifically to mission and vision. Was that about core values? Okay. Okay, so SSOs and bringing them together.
Just a shared vision.
Got it. Clarification of roles of such organizations like school level PTOs, even the council PTO, that also would apply to, yeah, got it. Good, thank you. I'm sorry.
I thought you were still.
No, I'm still right here. Like the Germantown Education Foundation, and even like the Education Foundation that the city has. Also the Houston Arts and Athletics Foundation. Having those individual identifiers, but also making sure the greater community knows what everybody does and how they can participate, more importantly, or most importantly. Quarterly, that says complication, but I think, is that compilation? I don't know, but it says complication. Solicit a broad group of Germantown residents. I was talking, I guess, a little bit about stakeholders and just making sure we identified who we're talking to specifically, and just drilling that down. Parents versus neighbors, that kind of thing. Business owners versus teachers, for instance. Concerns, defining roles in community, not educators. Feedback. I don't understand all these notes. Feedback, support. I don't know what that means, so I'm gonna actually ask about that in a moment. At the school level, standardized communication, streamlined from the district level. That was something that seemed to be a continual theme. District calendar came up. full participation from all schools. Student mentors, not sure if that was a concern, that we didn't have them or that we should have them, maybe both? Okay. Here's a bunch of mine, got it. Webmaster at the school level goes back to the standardized communication methods so that everybody knows what to expect and where to find everything, not just district level, but also streamlining that at the school level. Diversity and inclusion as we reach out into the community, understanding who we're talking to and who we are including, and the untapped resource of faith-based organizations. Provide information to stakeholders, and continue to expand, improve, communicating with stakeholders, always a concern, that's what this says. And I think that my thing was making sure that it's interactive. It's just not outward, it's an exchange.
So for student mentors, as I recall the conversation, we were talking about increasing the ability for students to talk to someone in the community who is living their dream. So if I'm in 7th or 8th grade and I'm thinking I want to be an accountant, perhaps I have the opportunity to talk to an accountant for an hour about what their day looks like, even if I can't go and participate for a day. Just having some opportunities for students to hear in more individualized kind of groups where they don't just go gray because they've heard all the conversation that they can hear, but have some one-on-one interaction with somebody who's doing what they are thinking about doing so they can hear what that track looks like. Other comments on community partnerships? Strengths, concerns, clarifications?
I thought the use of students as ambassadors is a strength for sure. That excites me. I know Dogwood has had student ambassadors to do some smaller capacity type of things for years. I don't know if they still do that. But I know that moving that through to the high school level would be a wonderful part. I also I think I mentioned, I don't remember which group it was in, having a student school board member that we've brought up multiple times already. I think that would be another opportunity to provide a leadership opportunity for a student who might be interested in public service or political science to have an experience like that. So that could be part of this arrangement as well.
Ms. O?
But also not,
Can I interrupt you just
Yeah.
because when I got to Whole Child, we actually had the opportunity to talk about both ambassador as an idea and school board student representative as an idea, and the possibility of letting youth apply to be ambassadors, but be ambassadors to the school board. So they might serve as ambassadors at their individual school, but then we as the school board would invite maybe 2 students a month to our meeting. They could lead the Pledge of Allegiance, maybe have some other part of the meeting be recognized as an ambassador, and have the opportunity just to see how it works without feeling like they were a member of the board and without narrowing it down to only one student gets to be a board member a year. And that could become hard to actually make all of the meetings for a year. I can understand that too with
Right.
a student. But so that they could participate and also not feel like they were the target recipient of the feedback from the community. We wouldn't be concerned about their social emotional health and their level of need to be committed to it if they were in an ambassador type role. So that was just an idea that
possibility. That's something that
bubbled up.
I think that people can look at and work through. But any type of leadership opportunity that involves these kids in the community is important, and we need to be facilitating that as much as we can. But also, and I mentioned this as well, using the groups we already have too. We have some incredible student groups that do service to the community. They do service to their school. They also participate in athletics or arts or whatever in other facilities that we can potentially send out and use them as promotional ambassadors, for lack of a better word, for our district. So making sure that while we're developing these other opportunities, we're also tapping into the resources we already have and these outstanding students that we have. Oh, and the district calendar, I was the one that kind of mentioned that. It would, I do think that is something on our website that we need, that is mandatorily used by all schools, so that parents have a place that they know they can go for accurate information. And with the technology that's out there, that is possible. It is not unattainable. So I do think that's an important part of getting a committed, engaged community, is making sure they have the accurate information. So.
I think a strength also was the PD for PR for our staff. And we sort of talked about, in my group, that could go a step further, that it could be combined with some customer service. I know that this summer we offered, or not summer, but the last school year at the end, we offered that kind of training to the office staff. And I know we received some very good feedback, how it really did help them in dealing with parents who were upset or having concerns. And maybe we could combine the two, just to give some more guidance to our teachers on how to handle situations. And I know sometimes they see things out there on the media that does upset them, and we've told them not to respond over the years. And I think it's a good idea to continue to inform them on how to handle some of those situations.
You look at me like how you want me to say. One of the things that has always set us apart, in my opinion, as a district, is the fact that we do engage the community, that we actively engage it. We've created kind of our own brand with our town halls, with our different committees, always bringing in the community, offering a survey, but always getting the opinion and the input of. And to see this embedded in this goal, to even grow that factor, I think was a huge strength of Goal 5.
As a big proponent publicly and with the board, who has been in favor of adding a student as a school board member, I absolutely love the idea of utilizing the ambassadors, because it gives multiple people an opportunity to serve and observe in that capacity. To me, I'd love to have everybody get to come and participate. So if we could do that, that would just have more people involved, and I think that is a very good way to achieve a couple of those things and a couple of different goals. With the centralized communication, we did talk a little bit about that, and the good news is and with the technology, that goes back to one of those COVID-related things that we sort of, it happened. People all got on a platform that they weren't previously on at the lower school levels, but that was coming. The good news was we all knew what this plan looked like, and not necessarily everybody else did. So I'm excited about the continuum of that, because I know that that is something that we continue to hear, go to one place, have it more concise, more one-stop shop as far as knowing what's happening, not only at the district, but at the school level. And talking about funding, I'll give Ms. Crowder full credit for saying, it's a tough time to be looking at funding for adding people, but this, thank goodness, is a 5-year plan. While we're not probably going to add some PR or communications, web-specific people was something we talked about, or website-specific people was something we talked about in our group. in the next 5 years, that's something that we're headed to. And it was good to see, and we've, kind of known that that was coming. But I'd like to see, a time frame with that. The publications are expensive. So I told Mr. Jones, I said, well, we can have this alumni association. We can have everybody pay their, whatever they're going to pay for their level, and then also ask for just their annual donations. Then we'll spend it on their publication. So that's not, we have to make sure that the funds are there, but just the budget alone for the communications department, to me, January, when we were having our community committee meeting, and that was one of the things that everybody's eyes just kind of looked, and they said, $5,000. $5,000. And we talk all about the communication that goes on within this community and our community schools. Again, a funding piece that we've identified, that if we could focus there, that would be something I think would be helpful to not only district staff, but also our stakeholders in the community. And that's certainly something we should try to identify, and the resources part. The alumni, and I'm just going to keep saying that I think that's a beautiful thing. There's a lot of nostalgia and a lot of second and third generation families in our community, and we really need to parlay that into community participation and community support.
Thank you. And I'm going to say, I added some sort of community group that is like the alumni group, because for those of us who are not alumni, we might need to still be pretty well connected.
We'll take your check too.
Yes, absolutely. I'll write it. Okay.
So thank y'all. I know it's a long day. Thank you, staff. In light of the long days that we've been spending dealing with other challenges too, we're thankful to take this time aside and look to the future of our district. So for us, the next step for us, we'd like to take the input that you have provided us and really look for ways that within our plan and also externally, how can we promote those strengths that y'all have identified? Look for ways within the plan that how can we provide that clarity either through language or the input that you provided us within that plan, and then also look at those concerns that you brought forward with us. What are ways that we can clarify those and modify those to make sure that we have the best plan possible? So that's our task now, is to take the feedback that you've given us and really refine what our staff has worked on for you. So we are hoping that we can, in September, bring this before the board. Of course, we would get that to you ahead of time, well in advance of our meeting there, so that at our next board meeting, we can go through the approval process, because we'd love the opportunity to start sharing this out and really start then refining it. So taking those objectives, taking those strategies that we've developed, and making sure that we are putting those pieces in place to make sure that we can continue the excellence that we've already started for this district. So hopefully we can accomplish that goal for this board. Are there any other questions for me or for staff, how we can proceed?
Based on what you were just describing, I just want to make sure I understand the timeline for where we are next with more community.
So yes, according to, and I'm not sure if we have the computer. So according to our next steps, following our plan that we've done, next step is for board to take the plan, adopt it. Like I said, we want to do some refinements based on the feedback that y'all have provided for us. And then in September, next steps for us are to push this plan and start promoting it out to the community in numerous ways and fashions.
So there's no other opportunities at this point to receive feedback based on where we are now versus where we were at the first of the year with the town halls that.
Well, it would be a challenge to then go back and then redesign this product. The goal was to get and if you look at the way the plan's designed, the goal is to gather all the feedback, gather all the objectives, do the subcommittees, and then allow staff to create this. So, no, not necessarily a survey or something like that. It's more about the promotion if you look at how they're moving forward. So we have done step 6, we've done y'all will take step 7, and then we would move into, if you can go to the next one, Ms. Crowder, that would be 8 and 9. And then of course for us, next steps for the board, looking at how we can evaluate. I think the key to realize too, this plan, and you see it in all strategic plans. They call it a living document. The goal for us, and we dealt with this with our previous strategic plan, we had an incredible ACT score, for example. And we thought, if we can grow those percentage of students by 2% a year, we will make incredible gains. Out of the gates, within the first 2 years, we had gone 40% increases in that. So that's why, for us, it'll be an annual refinement of this plan. So I think that will be the focus, and that'll be the opportunity for us. We know that this is a broad strategic plan. So there are going to be pieces of this that I think we were talking about technology, for example, that what we say we're going to do in technology right now may not make sense 3 years from now or 4 years from now. So really next steps would be board approval and then promotion.
Okay.
Okay.
With that, we stand adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.